that is a request by our next speaker, which I have the pleasure of introducing, which is the best. Okay, so this next speaker, I feel like everyone knows her. If you step 2 steps to the left or the right, or in front or in back, you're probably going to step on her toes because she is up here so much. But now, I'm going to let her do the talking because she's the most amazing person ever. So, please help me welcome a national weightlifting champion, Air Force Academy graduate with Top Gun credits, Warthog driver, author, Idaho Representative, Bam Jamma, our next Lieutenant Governor, Priscilla Giddings.
She's also a comedian at night, I think. Awesome. And an earring. Somebody lose an earring? Looks like we've got an earring up here. Great, thank you. I said I wanted to go first just to emphasize that Air Force beat Navy today. So I did that just for Chris. We've got our Air Force here. Where else do we have our Air Force? Anywhere? Oh, there we go. Awesome, back there. And where's our Navy? We totally outnumbered them, and we won. So they're on our way forward towards winning the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. But for those of you who don't know much about me, I am a state representative for District 7, and I am currently running for Lieutenant Governor. But tonight, I want to set aside campaign discussions to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the terror attacks on our country on September the 11th, 2001. It's an honor and a privilege, thank you so much for having me, to be able to share with you tonight some of my experiences serving in Afghanistan, which we called Operation Enduring Freedom. And I'd like to pause and take a speaker's privilege to introduce 2 of my guests tonight. The first is my father, Doug Giddings. He just retired in January as the Idaho County Sheriff after 50 years in law enforcement that started in Vietnam. Dad, would you just wave to everybody for me? Thank you, Dad, for teaching me how to love God and country and to respect our law enforcement. The second guest with me, our table was full, and so they ended up in the back table there. But my second guest is volunteering as my campaign regional director, Lauren Walker. She's a local from here in Post Falls. She and I flew in the Air Force together. And she has over 5,000 flight hours over Afghanistan. So she's a true warrior. I'm proud to call her a friend. Lauren, can you wave to everybody for us, please? Hey. In sharing some of my military experiences, I thought it would be fitting tonight to start with a military tradition of toasting to some important people. So normally when we would have a military dining in or a dining out, we would do a toast. And normally there'd be a big punch or a grog bowl, we would call it, in the middle of the room. Thankfully, we don't have a grog bowl tonight. We have some lemonade and water, and that's why I requested that you all put something in your cup. So if you don't have something, maybe borrow some from your neighbor, or just have an empty cup. And I know this is gonna be a little bit challenging, but please try to stand up, and we'll take a minute here, and you can get to where you can stand up, grab your glass. So the way this will work as you're getting seated or standing, I will propose each toast, and then in return you will raise your glass and say, "Hear, hear," in a tone and manner that suggests your level and support for the toast. We'll do just a few. Everybody looks like we're ready. Okay. Fellow Idahoans, tonight I propose a toast to America, to our constitutional republic, to each of our founding fathers who pledged their lives, their honor and their sacred honor and their fortunes to establish justice and liberty for all. And I propose a toast to the thousands of men and women and children who lost their lives 20 years ago to one of the worst unprovoked attacks in our country's history, to their families and their friends that they left behind. May we never forget their loss. And I propose a toast to the 2,300 service members and the 1,700 contractors who paid the ultimate price by sacrificing their lives in Afghanistan so that freedom may endure, and the 30,000 service members and others who have taken their own lives as a result of their service. May we never forget. And I propose a toast to all of our men and women who serve as first responders and our law enforcement, who are the thin blue line. May we forever be grateful to their sacrifices and thankful for their professionalism, ensuring that justice prevails. And lastly, I propose a toast to property owners, to all of you in this room, across the state and throughout the country. May we proudly stand together for the American dream, for freedom, for liberty, for limited government that is for the people and by the people.
And I propose a toast to our next Lieutenant Governor, Priscilla Giddings. Here, here.
Excellent, thank you. Please be seated. 20 years ago today, I'm sure you remembered exactly where you are when news filled the globe of the attack on American soil. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting in my freshman chemistry class at the Air Force Academy. I had graduated from Regans High School as the valedictorian and the student body president, and I departed Boise on a one-way trip to Colorado Springs for basic cadet training at the academy. And by September, we were in our classes starting chemistry that was not my favorite subject. And I remember as the news filled the TV screens across the campus, I looked out a wall of windows to my right, and I saw NORAD with all the antennas. And because NORAD was next on one of the hit lists, our entire area went on extreme lockdown. And that event definitely charted the next 20 years of my career in the Air Force. So, looking at Operation Enduring Freedom, my first opportunity to help was my first operational assignment, where I went to the 81st Fighter Squadron in Germany to fly the A-10 Warthog. I spent one of my longest flights in the cockpit of an A-10, flying over Europe, the Mediterranean, Africa, and the Middle East during a mission to transport A-10s from the mission depot, or the maintenance depot, to Afghanistan. And that actually is one of my favorite stories to share, and I remember that mission clearly because that's where I earned my call sign of Altoid. So in the fighter community, there's a tradition of how you get your call sign. And usually you show up to your first operational unit and they wait for you to do something dumb, dangerous, or different. And then they have mandatory fun that may include a little bit of drinking. And then the guidelines stipulate that it only has to be 10% truth on what they say about you to come up with how they give you your call sign. And I was the only woman in the squadron, and so I was already dreading what I was going to tell my mother at the end of that night that my new call sign was going to be. So on this trip, we were flying hogs to the Middle East, and we stopped to refuel. It was about 2 in the morning, and I was jet lagging because it was much earlier in the evening where we'd flown from. And I went to the gym, and it was a tent gym, and when I walked through the doors, I saw a big sign, and it said, if you bench press 150 pounds, you'll get a free t-shirt. Well, that was actually easy for me, because if we back up a little bit more, I was a big girl from an early age, and we often joke in my family that when I was about 10, I was fully grown, about 5'10", 160 pounds, and my dad said, honey, you're not gonna be a ballerina, let's go to the gym. And because you're here, I can share that joke. But, so we started lifting weights. So I was living in Idaho Falls at the time, and I started training, squat, bench press, deadlift, and I went on to break world records for my age and weight class in the squat, bench press, and deadlift. And so I kept lifting at the academy, and all my classmates knew. And so when I got to my first operational assignment, I was in the gym a lot with 400 pounds on my back for fun. So to walk into a deployed gym and to say you can bench press 150 pounds and get a free t-shirt, I was like, great. So I went and repped out a few, got the free t-shirt. The next day, the guys were like, how'd you get the free t-shirt? And I told them the story. So fast forward to my naming, and they went to the front of the room and they said, we're going to name her Altoid because she's curiously strong. So that ultimately ended up what I titled my book that I can sign copies. They have it out in the foyer. But after that was my kind of first opportunity to help with Operation Enduring Freedom. My second, I went on to fly nearly 1,000 combat hours as part of the 4th Expeditionary Reconnaissance Squadron at Bagram Airfield in Afghanistan in 2011 and 2012. And then I served a third deployment at the Combined Air Operations Center, helping oversee and deconflict flying operations over all of Afghanistan. But it was that first deployment to Afghanistan back in 2011, 1 month before the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, so about 10 years ago today. I was flying a combat mission in an MC-12 when our nation's largest fallen angel event since World War II occurred. See, just about 15 miles south of Kabul, we had located a target. And it was about, 2, 3 in the morning, and a SEAL Team 6 jumped on board 2 Chinook helicopters, and they infilled and south of the target, and they went in, they realized the target was not there. But they got some intel that the target had moved up the road to a different community, and so they decided, instead of scrapping the mission for the night, they decided to go get back on the helicopters and fly to the new community. And it was at that time, when they were en route to the second landing zone, when a terrorist was at the top of a building and shot an RPG, and it hit Extortion 17 and blew up the entire aircraft, killing 17 of our Navy SEALs from SEAL Team 6. So under my lead, our crew provided a combined total of 12 hours of overwatch for friendly forces during assault operations aimed at finding and prosecuting enemies in the area as the personnel cleaned up all of the strewn wreckage and human remains. Leave nothing behind was a standard operating procedure then. After the tragedy, the entire wing at Bagram formed up on the flight line, including most of the remaining SEALs that were still there. And we watched in silence as they first played the Afghani national anthem, and then they played the American national anthem. They covered each coffin with a flag, and they loaded it onto the back of a C-17. And it will forever be etched in my memory how we all filed past the back of that C-17 and offered one last final salute, which for me is a memory that shows us the difficult consequences of war. So 1 month later in September, on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I, along with other crews that day and night, flew up Initial, which is right over the runway, at Bagram, and we expended our unused flares for the evening in the dark sky as a patriotic display to our friendly forces on the ground of our continued and our steadfast efforts to defeat terrorism so that freedom may prosper. So some of our losses in Afghanistan are deeply personal for us right here in Idaho. In 2012, Sergeant Chris Workman from Rupert was killed in a Black Hawk crash. just had the opportunity to visit with his mom, a Gold Star mom, earlier this week. And some of you may have known a local from Sandpoint. He was a recruited athlete and was a thrower on the track team at the academy. And I too was a thrower and from Idaho, and so we became friends. He was a conference champion. He went on to compete in the world-class athlete program, and he ended up marrying another academy graduate who went to the Olympic trials in the javelin. So they both ended up getting deployed to Afghanistan at the same time, but to different bases. And on Christmas, they got the opportunity to reunite and have Christmas dinner at Kabul. And the next morning, he and his unit went out on a patrol, and his vehicle struck an IED, and we lost a local Idahoan that night. His wife got to return his remains to bring them back home, and one of my fellow aviators piloted the C-17 that brought him back home, and they saw her sleeping next to his coffin with her arm draped up over the coffin. He was a true Idaho hero who will be remembered for giving his all for others and for our freedom. So those are the memories that make it difficult to commemorate 20 years, especially as we know that it did not have to end this way. As we witness Americans being slaughtered, Christians beheaded, billions of dollars of equipment given to our enemies of freedom, there's 3 points that I'd like to leave with you tonight. First is pray. Please pray for our military now more than ever. Pray for the maintenance airmen right over at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, who had to clean up all of the human remains from parts of the C-17 that precipitously departed Afghanistan last month. Pray for the Idaho natives who were ordered to deploy to Afghanistan at the last minute right before the August 31st deadline, who thought that they were being assigned to a suicide mission by a deranged commander-in-chief. Pray for the thousands of soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines that are faced with making the decision to give up control of their medical privacy to an overreaching, overbearing, out-of-control government, many facing dishonorable discharge if they stand by their convictions. Pray for our nation, whose military is now the weakest that it has ever been relative to its massing enemies. Pray for the Afghanis, as the most extreme sect of Islamic fundamentalists take over every aspect of their society. As the Chinese move in and plunder their property rights to ransack their treasure trove of rare earth minerals, and as the Taliban slaughter anyone professing faith in Christ or disagreeing with their radical views. Pray. And although there have been some dark times, a positive remembrance of the 9/11 attacks is that in those 20 years since that happened, we have not had another major attack inside our country. Those sacrifices were made are not in vain, and we remember them with pride and thanksgiving. And it's also appropriate for us to remember the strengths of our people, our country, and our state as well. We in the United States have gone from being a group of persecuted refugees from all over the world 250 years ago to being the richest, most powerful, and most freedom-blessed nation in the history of our world. We've overcome immense trials to become the most diverse, yet the most unified nation in the world, and we are not yet done. We have the potential to rise to any challenge, repel any attack, and overcome any difficulty. And by the grace of God, we may yet return to our promise and our sacred calling of the American dream. So, the American dream is the promise and offer of security, both from outside attack and from oppressive governance, the ability for anyone to achieve based on hard work, and the promise that we can make life better for our families when they're gone. When I was 10, I got the opportunity to live in Israel for a year, where I witnessed firsthand a country where security was always on the mind of everyone living there. I witnessed the reaction to suspicious packages in a public space, which we thought was a bomb, and they were all too used to that, bomb threats all the time. It was familiar for them. And I fear that we may be looking back on the last 20 years as an island of security in a country in the years to come, but we will keep up the fight and honor the idea that we can provide security here at home. One way that we make life better for those who come after is that we, ordinary people, are able to pass down the property, the land, and the assets that we are able to build up over our lives. I reflect on the words of James Madison. I was preparing my remarks earlier this week. One of the principal authors of our Constitution, when he penned this, "As a man is said to have a right to his property, he may equally be said to have property in his rights." So it's remembering Afghanistan that reminds us of how blessed we have been as a nation and as a free people. We are all property owners. We all own the most precious property of all, our rights, because our founding fathers arranged for us to receive our God-given rights. So as we watch now, our rights are being sold to the highest bidder and pillaged by ruthless outside interests, and even worse, this is happening with the help and the connivance of our own government. This government is becoming a government that is spiraling out of control, and property rights, along with all of our other rights, are being seriously compromised. It's now more important than ever that we courageously stand together for our rights. As Benjamin Franklin said it perfectly when he said that we must hang together or we will surely hang separately. And that brings me to my second point, the importance of voting. Many of the hours we flew over Afghanistan and for Lauren in Iraq was to help them secure free and fair elections so that all Afghanis could vote. It could be described as precariously thrilling to watch Afghani women meekly participate in the election process. They were fearful of reprisal, but yet they were really hopeful of the ability to impact change in their country. I compare that to the perspective of a voting Australian man that I met in my third deployment. And he shared with me that voting in Australia is compulsory, and if you don't vote, you get fined. $15 it was at the time. Voting is such a fundamental gift to our free nation. Locally, city elections are right around the corner in November, and then our state primary elections will be in May. And I want to foot stomp the value of voting and the significance of your vote right here in Idaho. So in the 2020 election, we had 1.8 million people in Idaho, but 1 million registered voters. In our primary, that's a closed primary in May, we had 200,000 people vote as Republicans. Fast forward to the November general, we had 550,000 vote for Trump. So that means we had about 350,000 in the middle that are pro-America, pro-Trump, and they did not vote in the Republican primary. That means that we have about 11% of the population in Idaho determining the future of our state. Your vote is so important, and it has a huge ripple effect if you vote in that primary. Please vote. Your vote is valuable, and it's going to shape our future as a state. So as we face so much uncertainty in our state and nation, while our leaders are projecting weakness, they're betraying our close allies, they're caving to Marxist indoctrination in our schools, they're mandating medical procedures, they're constraining our businesses, and they're forfeiting our property rights. Please keep your eyes heavenward. I believe we are witnessing a great separation in which the wheat is being separated from the chaff in the greatest battle of our lifetime, even right here on American soil, right here in Idaho, where liberty and tyranny have squared off. The battle for freedom is right on our doorstep. And so, my third and final point for the evening, for you, is to keep buying ammo. You know, it's going to take courageous leadership at all levels of government. Excuse me. And that government is including the family. You know, so much courageous discussion going on in families right now also. Leadership that's going to need to stand on principle no matter what the cost. Please pray diligently and encourage your neighbors to vote, because exercising their voting rights is so important. And keep buying ammo. I didn't talk much about politics, I don't think, but out on the table I do have my flyer about my campaign if you would like to learn more about it. I have some books if you would like me to sign it. It would be honored. There's so many more stories I would love to share with you. But I thank you for your willingness to stand up for our republic, your devotion to our property rights. Thank you. And for all the rights of our free people. May God bless each one of you and keep and protect the great state of Idaho and to restore the United States of America. Thank you.